Hi there, and welcome to BSF Recovery Team. Well, we're still in the garage, and if you caught my last video, you'll remember that we have a little bit of a problem with our Kingpin style Dana 60, and that is our upper cone on the driver's side has come loose from the threads, messed up the threads, and we also said that we could switch to a different housing that we do have, but instead we're going to repair this one. We also said that we were going to weld this one. But before we do that, let me talk about a couple of other ways that you could repair this. First of all, you could grind the weld down on the C, remove the C, and put a replacement C on. They do make bigger and stronger ones in the aftermarket, but they are kind of expensive, and that's a very tricky repair. I also heard rumor that there is a company that makes a threaded insert for this. You can drill or ream this hole out, put a threaded insert, get a new cone with good threads, and repair it that way. The problem with doing that is you have to drill or ream out this hole, and a drill bit that large or a pilot reamer, which is what you should use to keep the correct kingpin angle, is rather expensive and sometimes hard to find. You're not going to find it down at your local hardware store. So that's why we're going to weld this one. And we should be able to do that without changing the kingpin inclination or the caster, simply because this one is not sloppy in the hole. Even though the threads are wore out, it still fits fairly snug into the hole without any movement one way or the other. Now, welding on cast iron is a little bit tricky, and we'll talk about the ways to do that in a little bit. First, we have to prepare this so we can weld it. Okay, the very first thing we did is we cleaned all the grease off of this so we have nice clean metal to work with. And what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to grind a relief in on the bottom side of this hole where we're going to weld it. We don't have enough room to weld on the top side without machining it back down again around the cone. So we're just going to weld it on the bottom side. We're going to grind a relief in here, and we're going to grind a taper on the end of the cone so we get nice good penetration deep into this hole. Okay, we've ground about a 45-degree angle all the way around as best we can, about a 1/4 inch wide. And that gives us a nice relief here to lay a bead in. We're also going to grind the end of this cone at a 45 to give us even more room for a bead. Now that we have our cone, the threads ground down, approximately a 45-degree angle, again about a 1/4 inch. That should give us a nice little V to lay the bead in here. We're up at the other garage now where the welder is. We have our cone pushed up into the hole, held by this bracket, jack stand, clamp stuff. And before we get to this, we're going to talk about welding cast iron, and specifically just similar metals together. We have the yoke is cast iron, the cone is steel. Now, I haven't done any of this for a long time. I think I did it once way back in tech school in welding class. That was a long time ago and I don't remember much of it. So we had to dig out the books and do a little research. According to the books, there's actually 2 ways of welding cast iron with a stick or a MIG welder. The first is a method called cold method, and the second is a method called the hot method. The cold method isn't really cold, but it doesn't require preheating the cast iron. and the hot method preheats the cast iron. Now, the cast, you want to be kind of careful because you don't want to go over 1400 degrees, the book says. If you go over 1400 degrees, you can create microfractures in the cast iron and all kinds of things like that we won't get into. So we want to heat the cast iron between 800 and 1200 degrees. How do you tell how hot it is? Well, they make things called paint sticks that melt at a certain temperature. So you can heat it up, take the stick and apply it to the metal, and if it melts, that's what temperature you're at. We didn't acquire any of those, so what we're going to do to measure our temperature when we're preheating is we're going to use a thermal gun here. Now, this thermal gun goes to 936 degrees. So we're going to preheat between 800 and 900 degrees. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to use nickel rod, specifically 99 nickel rod. The reason for using the nickel rod, from what I understand, reading the books, is because nickel rod is a little bit malleable. So as everything cools at a different rate, because the cast iron will cool at a different rate than the steel, our nickel rod will maintain a weld without cracking because they're cooling at a different rate. That's the way I understand it from reading. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to preheat the cast here, get it up to the temperature we want. Then we're going to arc weld it with my stick welder here at about 95 amps, kind of a cold weld, again, because we don't want to get over 1400 degrees for any period of time. And then we'll let it cool down naturally. They even talk about maybe wrapping it with a blanket or burying it in the sand to let it cool down even slower. Well, kind of hard to bury this whole axle in the sand. And I don't really have a blanket to wrap it with, so we're just going to make sure that it cools naturally. This might take a while. Okay, out here we have about 850 degrees. Back here we're only at about 600 degrees. So we're going to heat it a little bit more back in here. Okay, we're at about 800 degrees back there now. So we're almost prepared to weld it. Still at about 820 degrees. We might fail at this, I don't know. We'll see. Okay, there's about half of it. We're going to clean that up, then do the other half. Our temperature has dropped to about 640 degrees. So we're going to warm it back up again before we weld the rest. Don't know if that's the right thing to do, but that's what we're going to do. Well, there you are. Not a perfect weld by no means, but like I said, I haven't done this since Votech school. I think it'll hold though. We're back down in the main garage now. We're going to let this cool overnight, then we can start putting everything back together. And of course this is a good time to service the wheel bearings, and probably the ones on the other side too. Thanks for watching, BSF Recovery Team. Keep wheeling, stay safe, subscribe to this channel, share my videos, and maybe we'll get out there in the woods.